All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're looking at a story of absolutely incredible perseverance. I mean, we all know the iconic character of Rocky Balboa, right? But what we're going to explore today is how the man behind the character, Sylvester Stallone, had to fight just as hard, if not harder, in reality to ever get that story on screen.
$40. Just take a second and imagine hitting a point where you literally only have $16 in your bank account. Your wife is pregnant and you are, quite frankly, starving. That was Stallone's actual reality in the early 1970s. His career was the ultimate underdog story. He was a complete unknown, and studios were just constantly rejecting him. They told him he didn't fit those classic Hollywood beauty standards, and he had a speech paralysis from birth that made it kind of difficult for him to talk clearly. So he's living in this rundown boarding house right above a noisy subway station, completely ignored by the industry. And then, driven by absolute desperation, he walked into a liquor store and sold his best friend, his loyal dog, Butkus, for just $40, just so he could afford to buy groceries.
That brings us to our first section, hitting rock bottom. Next up, writing the knockout script. So, how exactly do you get out of a hole that deep? Well, you create your own way out. Stallone was desperately seeking inspiration, and he actually found it by watching an unknown club fighter named Chuck Wepner miraculously survive 15 rounds against the legendary Muhammad Ali. I mean, everyone thought Ali would just crush him instantly, but Wepner kept hanging on. He took the hits, and he fought back. Stallone literally saw a movie play out in real life right in front of him. He rushed home to his apartment and just started writing like a man possessed. He didn't even have a typewriter. He wrote entirely by hand in notebooks. He poured all of his own flaws, his desires, and his struggles into this character, a debt collector named Rocky. And within just 3 feverish days, he completed the very first draft of Destiny. Which leads us into our next section, betting on himself.
Now, that script eventually found its way into the hands of respected producers Irwin Winkler and Robert Chardoff, and surprisingly, they actually loved it. But this led to an incredibly tense boardroom standoff with United Artists. Just imagine being flat broke, walking into a room full of powerful studio executives, and having to fight for your own creation. The studio really wanted to buy the script, but they utterly refused to let an unknown lead the film. They laid out very clear demands for an established box office draw. They were throwing out massive names like Robert Redford, Burt Reynolds, James Caan, and Ryan O'Neal. Their one absolute, non-negotiable condition to greenlight the film, Sylvester Stallone must not be the protagonist.
So, to get rid of him, the studio executives made their first massive offer, $125,000. Think about that. For a guy with $16 to his name, this is a life-changing fortune. But Stallone said no. He told them he would only sell if he could play the lead. The executives were completely stunned. They looked at each other and just doubled it. $250,000. We really have to pause here and feel the psychological intensity of this moment. This is an unimaginable sum of money for a guy who literally couldn't even afford to feed his dog. He could have solved every single problem in his life in an instant, but he held back and he refused again.
And then we hit the absolute peak of the negotiation. $360,000. The studio is basically begging him to walk away at this point. Stallone thought of his pregnant wife, his lost dog Butkus, and his years of sheer frustration. The pressure was overwhelming, no doubt about it, but he clung to his creative integrity.
He looked at those executives and told them flat out, "I know very well that if I sell this script and it does very, very well, but I'm not part of the deal, I'm going to do something crazy." That raw, terrifying determination proved to the producers that they were sitting across from the very essence of the character they wanted to buy.
So, believe it or not, they caved. But it came with a major catch. Stallone ultimately accepted a tiny salary of just $23,000. The studio agreed to let him star, yeah, but they slashed the production budget to a bare-bones $1 million. And if they went over budget, the producers would be personally liable. Stallone took this massive pay cut just so he could keep the starring role.
Because here is the craziest part of this whole story. Stallone didn't just play Rocky Balboa, he essentially lived the exact same narrative arc. On one side, we have Stallone, broke, ignored by the industry, fighting a system of powerful executives for just one shot to prove he's a real actor. And on the other side, Rocky, a broke mob debt collector, fighting the world champion Apollo Creed for just one shot to prove he isn't a loser. It's wild. They are the exact same person.
Moving right along, let's look at filming against the odds.
With the deal finally signed, they faced the grueling reality of director John G. Avildsen's guerrilla filmmaking. I mean, they had no money, no time, and absolutely no room for error. They had to shoot the entire film in just 28 days. Because they only had one camera, they had to nail single-take shots. They literally couldn't afford permits, so they were out there filming illegally on the streets of Philadelphia. When they needed crowds, they just used real neighborhood locals who happened to be walking by. And when they couldn't afford extras for the ice skating scene, they just filmed it in a completely empty rink after hours, which actually ended up making the scene incredibly intimate and iconic.
But, a lack of resources often breeds innovation. Director John G. Avildsen brought in a cameraman named Garrett Brown, who had just invented something called the Steadicam. This was a groundbreaking, totally unproven invention, but it was perfectly utilized to capture fluid motion over uneven surfaces. It's the whole reason we have that iconic, triumphant tracking shot of Rocky running up the art museum steps. And it also allowed the camera to get millimeters away from the actors inside the boxing ring.
And speaking of the ring, the fight choreography was incredibly intense. Stallone and Carl Weathers, who played Apollo Creed, rehearsed non-stop. During filming, Stallone willingly took real, brutal punches from Weathers to ensure the struggle felt entirely authentic on screen. When Weathers questioned why an unknown would knock down the champion in the first round, Stallone replied with this brilliant line, "It's not a boxing match, it's a story."
All right, that brings us to our final section, going the distance. You'd think the hard part was over by now, right? Well, not quite. The studio execs absolutely hated the original ending of the film. In the original cut, Rocky and Adrian quietly walk out of the arena together, and the execs found it way too depressing. They even threatened to just release the movie straight to television. Stallone agreed the ending lacked euphoria, so he rewrote the triumphant, iconic Adrian ring embrace that we all know today. But here's the kicker. They had zero budget left. The producers literally had to mortgage a property to fund the $25,000 reshoot, faking a massive arena crowd with only 25 extras carefully placed in the darkness.
And the return on investment was absolutely insane. Despite terrible early reviews from critics, audiences completely connected with the spirit of overcoming adversity. They stood up and cheered in the theaters. That tiny indie movie with a $1 million budget turned into a $225 million global blockbuster. It earned 9 Oscar nominations and actually took home 3, including Best Picture and Best Director.
But for Stallone, the ultimate victory wasn't just winning the Oscars. As soon as he got his initial $23,000 paycheck, he tracked down that liquor store owner to buy back his dog, Butkus. Knowing Stallone was desperate, the owner extorted him, demanding an exorbitant $15,000. And Stallone gladly paid it. He got his best friend back, and Butkus even got a role in the movie. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Just look at the journey we've laid out here today. Stallone risked starvation, he walked away from $360,000, and he fought an entire Hollywood system just to protect his vision. So you really have to ask yourself, when the odds are entirely against you and everyone is telling you to take the easy way out, do you possess the sheer willpower to go the distance? What is your dream actually worth?